thank you for coming. This is another class in the series of classes that my brother and I have been giving at this park, which we were instrumental in creating along with our dad. It is the first neighborhood park on Key Biscayne, and it is the first botanical park on Key Biscayne, and that was something that I felt very strongly about. I used to work at Fairchild Tropical Botanic Garden in Coral Gables, and one of my favorite things about the garden was, aside from all of the different plants that were there, was also that there were labels and you could learn about the plants as you walked around, that there were host plants for butterflies and caterpillars and all sorts of other creatures that come and frequent our native spaces. And the more we build up, as the Key is, highly residential, the less green space there is and the less natural areas there are for wildlife. So it was really important to me that this park not only reflect something with a wide variety of botanical elements, but that it also attracted our native wildlife. And in particular, I'm quite fond of butterflies and caterpillars, but we also have a lot of really cool native and non-native lizards. We have the unfortunately invasive iguanas, which tend to eat all the pretty flowers. And we also have a whole bunch of birds, both some that stay around year-round, others that are migratory. And so it was really important to have plants that would attract all of those elements, give them a place to feed, give them a place to live, and give them a place to breed. Last count, I have over 100 species, distinct species of plants in the park. I have a lot of natives, but I also have a lot of tropical exotics that do well in our climate because they grow in similar climates around the world. Some are near natives, which means they're from basically the Greater Antilles, Caribbean area. Some are from Central and South America. Others are from as far off as Africa and Central Asia and Indonesia. In fact, there's a plant behind me that's from Japan. So really a wide variety of things, but all of them work together to create a beautiful place and to create a beautiful setting for viewing and inviting wildlife. I'd like to talk to you about the plants that we have in the park, but while I do so, I want to talk to you about what those plants do for the wildlife. So for instance, in this pergola that we're standing or sitting under, which was designed and helped and built by my brother, along with two fellows that came down from South Carolina to help build it. But in here, I have two different kinds of vines, neither one of which are native, but the reason that I chose them is that they're more woody climbers rather than vines that will spread onto the surrounding vegetation. So they'll take less control in the long run to keep them from taking over everything else, but they'll still grow up and over the pergola if they're trained properly to create shade, and they'll provide beautiful flowers. So on the middle two pillars, I have the common name for it isn't so common, but Pride of Selangor. It's a Bauhinia vine, Bauhinia bidentata, and it gets beautiful flushes of yellow to orange flowers, and the new growth, the new leaves are red. So it's just a really beautiful plant overall. And then on the corners, I have what's known as Queen's Wreath, which is Petrea volubilis or Petrea racemosa. I'm a little uncertain as to which species specifically is the correct name for this, but it gets beautiful flushes of purple flowers, which are surrounded by purple bracts, which last long after the flowers fall off. So, both of these flower throughout the year. So it's just going to always look really nice and inviting and create a nice, cool place for people to gather and enjoy some community time. Along the serpentine path and throughout the park, I have a variety of native plants, which includes native palms, native shrubs, native trees, and native grasses. In addition to that, I have exotic trees and shrubs, and I don't actually have any exotic grasses. All of the grasses are native. The main butterflies that we get here on Key Biscayne, which is the zebra longwings, which is a black and white striped heliconia butterfly. Its host plant is a native vine that just kind of pops up and spreads onto other things called Passiflora suberosa, or corky stem passion flower. It pops up in people's yards. They're always pulling it out. Sometimes it manages to find a place where people don't pull it out, which is great. And the more people are educated, the less hopefully they'll pull it out, and they'll let it take over an area of some kind, or grow up a tree trunk, or grow up along a fence. Because it's not only the host plant for our Florida state butterfly, the zebra longwing, but it is also the host plant for the Julia heliconia butterfly, which is an orange butterfly, and for the Gulf fritillary, which is also orange, but on the underside of the wings it almost looks like stained glass. It's like white mottled with like brownish spots. They're really beautiful. So one plant is the host plant for 3 different butterflies. And all of their caterpillars have similar looks to them. They all have spines that come up, or spikes that along their bodies. The zebra longwings, the caterpillars are white with black spikes. The Julia butterfly, which is just a solid orange or kind of rust-colored butterfly, their caterpillar is kind of like a blackish color with an orange stripe down it. And then the Gulf fritillary caterpillars are more orange with almost like a greenish stripe down the middle and black spines. So usually the best way to find caterpillars is to look. It became something that I started doing, I don't know how long ago, a long time ago. I started looking under leaves. As I walked by something, if I saw that maybe it had a freshly eaten hole in it, or you can sometimes look for some of their poop droppings, and you'll notice, oh, okay, there's some little tiny things here. That means something's feeding on this plant. And I wanted to know, well, what's feeding on the plant? And then you start looking at it, and you start looking under the leaves, and you start finding caterpillars. And they go through different stages of life, so sometimes you'll be lucky and you can spot the eggs, which are very, very small. And then other times you'll see the very tiny babies, which could be like a fingernail sliver as they first emerge, and then they go through different instars. So as they grow, as they feed, they'll shed their skin a couple of times, as they'll grow kind of out of it, and they basically walk right out of it at one stage or another. And they've got a bigger body, and they do that a couple of times until they've fed to their capacity, and then they find a nice place to create a chrysalis. They'll stay in their chrysalis, depending on the species, usually for about 8 to 10 days. Some species stay in a little longer, some a little less. There isn't really a time of day. First I thought, oh, they all emerge in the early morning hours. No, they emerge whenever they feel like it. I don't know how they know when to emerge, but they find a nice time, decide to come out, they break through the chrysalis, and then they have to stand there for a minute, or well, more than a minute. They have to stay, and they have to stretch out their wings, which have been crunched up in this tiny little encasing. They have to spread them out, dry them out, and eventually they get to a point where they feel like, okay, I can fly away. And they fly and they find something to feed on. So aside from having the host plant, which is what they lay their eggs on and the caterpillars grow on, it's important to have nectar plants for them, which means almost anything that flowers is a nectar source for butterflies, moths, and skippers. And I didn't really mention moths and skippers because they are less appreciated than butterflies. Butterflies get the better rap because they are more beautiful in general, although there are some very beautiful moths. But in general, there are by far more species of moths than there are butterflies. And skippers are something that's it's in the same family of Lepidoptera, but they are kind of in between a butterfly and a moth. They're the little brown, they look like moths in the traditional sense of thinking of a moth as something that's brown and smaller. And they really do skip from plant to plant, and you'll see them during the day a lot. We have a couple of different kinds here. We have a mangrove skipper, we have dusty wing, juvenile skipper. We have a couple different ones. And they feed on most of the same plants that the butterflies do. And then moths are the ones that generally come out at night. And moths are actually more of a primary pollinator than butterflies. They tend to pollinate far more flowers than butterflies do. So I talked about the 3 butterflies that have the one host plant, but then of course we have our famous monarch butterflies. Throughout the country, they're known to migrate. Here in South Florida, they tend to be stationary. They don't have any need to migrate. Everything they have is here year-round, as long as there's milkweed for them to, as their host plant, to lay eggs and have caterpillars on. And the cool thing about milkweed is that not only is it a host plant, but it is also a nectar plant because it does also produce flowers that provide food source. So we have the common one that we have here in cultivation and just generally around is actually Mexican milkweed or scarlet milkweed, which gets either red flowers or yellow flowers, and it's all the same species, just some pop up yellow, some pop up red with a yellow center. And it's not quite considered, depending who you ask, it's native, depending who you ask, it's naturalized. It is, however, the one that grows best if you were to plant one in your garden. The native species, we have Asclepias tuberosa, which is an orange milkweed, but it doesn't do so well out of its natural habitat down here. It grows a little better a little further up north. We have a swamp milkweed, Asclepias perennis. The milkweed that's the Mexican milkweed is Asclepias curasavica. And then we have a sand milkweed that grows along like the Lake Wales Ridge and things. And I can't think of the name of it right now, but it's also beautiful. So we have a lot of different ones. And throughout the United States, there are a lot of different species of milkweeds that grow in different zones, different areas. Up north, the milkweeds tend to have a thicker, more succulent leaf. And up north, they're also a host plant for a tussock moth caterpillar. But down here, it's just the monarchs and queens. Queens look a lot like monarchs until you start to notice the difference. At first, they both look like orange and black butterflies. They're both royalty, queens and monarchs. Their caterpillars look strikingly similar. They both incorporate black and yellow and white stripes. But the queens are a slightly darker, deeper orange. They don't have the same venation along the wings, the same pattern as the monarchs. They're a bit smaller of a butterfly generally, and their caterpillars, when you do start to see a difference, they have 2 sets of antennae or filaments, one on their front end and one on their back end, whereas monarch caterpillars only have 1 set. As you look around, you may see some other ones flying about. So a lot of what we're seeing are monarchs. There's a tiny little white butterfly that when you look closely has a little bit of blue, and actually the back sides of the wings are blue. There's a ground cover that I have in here that again is frequently mistaken for a weed in most people's yards, but what's actually a weed is grass. Grass is the invasive plant, and a lot of the ground covers that come up, not all, but a lot, are native plants. And one of those is called Phila nodiflora, or frog fruit, or Charlie's creeper. It has a bunch of different names. When I was a kid, we used to make kind of like daisy chains out of these flowers. This is actually a host plant for these tiny little blue butterflies, and it's also a host plant for our native white peacock butterfly. And interestingly enough, the white peacocks, they seem to range in size. I don't know if it depends on how much food they eat as a caterpillar. If they decide to go into a chrysalis a little early, they come out a little smaller. I'm not really sure what makes that happen. But they tend to flutter around. Those 2 you'll often see on the grass because their host plant is grass level. So those 2 have that as a native host plant, and it's a wonderful thing to incorporate into your garden. Another native type of butterfly, because there are a few that come into this category, are the sulfurs and whites. They are all considered in the same family of butterflies, and they are either yellow or a yellowish orange or pure white. And they are a little bit more seasonal. You don't see them all year. We did just see one a minute ago. I saw it fluttering around here, but I'm sure we'll notice more as we walk around. Their host plants are sennas and cassias. Sennas and cassias, again, used to be lumped into all one family. And so even when you say the common name of some of these plants, it may now scientifically be named acacia, but its common name still has senna. or vice versa. So I have a few of those in the garden, some of which are native and some of which are exotic. But we have our native one is the Chapman sensitive plant, which is Senna mexicana variety Chapmanii. And there's another one that is privet senna, which is Senna ligustrina, which looks pretty much exactly like that one. One that I have across the bocce court, which I'm going to let you guys smell, is called popcorn senna, because when you crunch up the leaves, it actually smells like buttered popcorn. That is not native to here, but it does really well here. It's native to Central and South America. I saw it growing really nicely in Mexico. And that one is Senna didymobotria. So some of these names are really complicated. There's a reason that people tend to use common names more than scientific names. They're easier to pronounce and easier to remember. However, common names are often common for a variety of plants. And they become common based largely upon culture and where you are. So something could be called, for instance, the tabubuyas from the Bahamas are called five fingers, but they can also be called, they have a variety of different names. They can be called trumpet flower. Well, trumpet flower can refer to really anything with a trumpet-shaped flower. There are a lot of plants that fall into that category. So as you use a common name, it's not always so easy to identify what you're talking about. It's easy if you're standing in front of the plant to say the common name and for everybody that's around to know what you're talking about. But if you use a common name, if you, for say, go to a nursery, they might show you a plant that is not at all what you were talking about, but it happens to have the same common name. Scientific names tend to be either named after the person who discovered the plant, or after the person who named the plant, or the name has something to do with a characteristic of the plant. And so the way that I do have some labels around the park. On those labels, I have the family name, which is the larger category. Then I have the scientific name, which is made up of the genus and species. And then if there is a common name, that's listed underneath. And then I have listed where they come from. So not everything has a common name, because not everything is common enough to have a common name. Or it has a common name like Pride of Selangor, which isn't so common, but maybe it's what they use where it comes from in and around Thailand and Singapore. Other things, I have a tree right over here that is native to Africa, to Kenya and Zimbabwe. This one here, which right now is forming some new seed pods, which you can see are green. The old ones last on the tree for a really long time, and they have a really nice red, rich red color on the inside, and it's like a black, blue, velvety seed on the inside. So some people just call it black pearl. There's the name where it comes from is Magombe. So, it's different things going on there in terms of what you could call it. The scientific name is Magidea zancharabica. So, like I said, you could go, there's a lot of different things that you can call something. Often it's best if you want something identified to have a picture, which is pretty easy these days. Everyone carries around a cell phone camera. In the past, you had to send in a sample of the leaves, maybe the flowers, maybe the stem structure. So there's a lot of different ways that things get identified. This is my favorite caterpillar guide. It's Caterpillars of Eastern North America. I got it several years ago, and it's my favorite reference. Not everything is in here. There are some 5,000 caterpillars east of the Mississippi, so they couldn't possibly incorporate all of them into one book. But this is a lot of the really common ones. So this has served me well down here. It served me well when I was living up in Delaware. And on the front cover here is a really gorgeous caterpillar, which I was super lucky to see actually on Elliott's Key. This is a moth caterpillar. Sometimes the moth caterpillars are even more beautiful than the butterfly caterpillars. This is the American Beauty, and it's found really more in the Keys, and I was lucky enough to be out on someone's boat. We stopped at Elliott's Key, we were walking around, and this guy was there, and I was so excited to be able to see something that I'd only seen in a book. So I'll leave this out. Everybody is welcome to look through it. Another one of the caterpillars that we're probably more familiar with, if you grow tomato plants, would be the tomato hornworm. I have a hard time killing anything. I know, obviously, if you're trying to grow tomatoes, you don't want the hornworms eating your plants. Maybe you can set one aside for the caterpillars or not. Obviously, even with monarchs, you can plant as much milkweed as you want. They'll still eat it to the ground. It'll never be enough. There will always be more monarchs. The nice thing about that is that it does grow back. Another one that I actually forgot to mention, and this is an important one, and I've seen it in Crandon Park, but I haven't seen it on the larger part of the island. It's the Atala butterfly, and it was driven almost to extinction. Its sole host plant is Kunti, which is a type of cycad. I have it in the park, I'll show you. Zamia integrifolia or Zamia pumila. And it was almost driven to extinction because Native Americans and pioneers both used the tubers on the plant as a food source. They ground it into flour to create bread products. They ate it as a starch. And so as those plants were driven toward extinction, so were the butterflies. And they have been making a really nice comeback, in large part due to specific efforts. And as more people are planting kuntis, they have more food sources. But again, if you have atalas eating your kuntis, they will eat them to the ground. So you have to have a lot, and you have to be patient because the kuntis don't grow back particularly quickly. And sometimes you won't have enough to support an entire population of atalas. You can either plant more, or you can decide maybe you want to get rid of some of the atalas. You can share them with neighbors, or God forbid, kill them. But sometimes that is necessary to control population sizes, or if you want plants in your yard specifically for, beautification purposes, you probably don't want something that's being decimated by caterpillars. So maybe you have an area that's reserved for keeping the caterpillars happy, and then you have another area that's reserved for looking at the beautiful flowers before they're all gone. As we walk around, I'll point out some different ones, and you can see, at least in the park, how they're growing. And some of them don't get sun all day. I certainly have things planted at home under my oak tree or in the side yard that don't get as much sun. Some things will still be good as butterfly host plants or other pollinator attractor plants, even if they're in the shade, but they won't produce as many flowers if they're not getting as much sun. So there's different trade-offs, but there are a nice variety of shade-growing plants that will still flower, and even if they're not the host plant, they still could be a nectar plant. So you'll still, even if you're not growing butterflies in your yard, you can still be attracting butterflies to your yard. And one of the things that's really important is having that throughout the community, because there isn't just one yard that can support everything that's going on. And so, bees can travel for, I think, up to like 5 miles, maybe more. I might have that wrong. They'll go to everybody's yard, and which is why, again, it's important not only to have the plants, but not to spray them. If you are in need of using something to control a specific pest, try and keep it as something that is sustainable and environmentally safe, and that really only affects that one specific plant that you're targeting and doesn't affect everything in your yard, or doesn't affect the population of a lot of different types of wildlife. Because it's not only, if you're killing the caterpillars, you might be killing the birds that eat the caterpillars, and you might be killing the larger predators that eat the birds. So it's a whole cycle of things that happen. But there are some safe pesticides that can be used to control. For instance, if you are growing tomatoes and you have tomato hornworms, you can use BT, which is a natural bacteria, which naturally just kills the caterpillars, and it doesn't affect anything else. It doesn't affect the plant, and it doesn't affect anything that could come and eat the caterpillars. There are other things, of course, that will affect everything in the food chain. There's also another really good way to take care of bad infestations of pests is to use beneficial insects. So in addition to the things that we normally see and hear about regularly, like butterflies, another really great beneficial insect is ladybugs or ladybirds, depending on where you're from. They go by different names. There are a lot of different species of ladybirds, ladybugs. Some of them are red with black spots, some are just red, some are black with red spots. There's different kinds. But in general, those are really good pest control, particularly when they lay their young. The most voracious feeders are the larvae, which look nothing like what you would expect a ladybug to look like when it's in its juvenile form. But so the ladybug larvae are great at keeping other pests in control. Another great beneficial insect is Greenlease Wings. Their larvae are known as aphid lions, I mean. So that kind of tells you, like, they really go after the aphids. So if you can afford to do it, beneficial insects are a much better way to go than spraying. And I highly advocate for that. Another wonderful thing that we have down here is a variety of lizards. We have one native gecko, and you will almost never see it unless you are looking through some brush. There was a time when I was removing a bed of ferns, and that was when I first found one. They're very small, really cute little guys, but it's our only native gecko. We do have some invasive species of geckos. Sometimes if you're around town, I've never heard one out here, but I have heard one when I've been at Fairchild at night. There's the Tokay Gecko, which is so named because basically it makes the sound like Tokay, Tokay. There's a bunch of different native and non-native anoles, which are our typical brown lizards that you see. Sometimes they're the green ones. There are different kinds. There's the large-headed anole, there's brown anole, green anole, there's a Cuban anole, there's a Puerto Rican anole. They all look somewhat the same. There's a bark anole. So you really have to start, if you want to know the difference, you have to start really looking at the pictures and it takes time to become comfortable identifying the different species. But in general, you'll see lizards all around. We do have a few invasives that in recent years have become more and more prevalent. One of those are the iguanas. We've got the black iguanas, the green iguanas, and the spiny-tailed iguanas. Those have a variety of different issues that they cause. For instance, they'll eat all the bougainvillea flowers, or all of your hibiscus flowers, or all of really any of your flowers. They love flowers. Oh, they love flowers. That's a favorite treat of theirs. But they'll also eat a lot of foliage and other things. The iguanas don't really eat other wildlife, those iguanas. We do have, in addition to those, we have Cuban night anoles, which look like kind of like a small iguana or like a larger lizard. They're green. They usually have some yellow on them. They're really beautiful, but they will eat our native anoles. We have giant amevas and also another type of ameva that you'll see them around. They're really fast. The giant amevas are kind of like a blackish, bluish color. They kind of slither around the ground, look really rapidly. They dig holes under things. They run fast and hide. The smaller ones are like a brown with yellow stripes. So I don't know enough about what those do, but they aren't native. They definitely are competing with a lot of our native critters and eating different things. I think plays a role in a unique way. I mean, even earthworms aren't native. Our native earthworms were eradicated some 10,000 years ago, and all the earthworms that you see now when you dig in your soil are European earthworms. They have a lot of really great benefits in terms of aerating the soil and breaking down decomposing nutrients, but they can also have some negative effects, especially if they become overpopulated or as the climate is changing as they shift into new environments. We also have frogs. We have, some of them are native, some again are invasive. We have Cuban tree frogs and we have native tree frogs. We have toads, some of which are very large and very loud and can be bad for your pets. Some of which really don't pay you much attention, they just hang out by the ponds. And I know this is a lot of people's least favorites, are snakes and spiders. Spiders are incredibly important. They eat all of the insects that you don't want. We do have what are known as garden snakes, there are 3 different species they're known as racers. There's the black racer, the Everglades racer, and the brown chin racer. And they tend to be a narrower, smaller snake. They're racers, they're very quick to get out of your way. Again, they really don't harm anybody or anything. They're way more scared of you. They're not venomous or poisonous. Where you do have to be careful about snakes is if you go into the Everglades. There we do have venomous snakes. And then, like I said, spiders are another really good thing. So snakes are eating things that are bad. Spiders are eating things that are bad. We have some really cool different ones, and I'd love to start walking around with you guys, showing you the plants, showing you the host plants, and maybe we'll see some snakes, probably not, but maybe we'll see some lizards, some birds, some butterflies, and I can point them out. This is giant milkweed. So this is a host plant for both queen and monarch butterflies. It gets these really, really cool flowers. It does have a milky sap, and I don't see any caterpillars on it right now. If we see one as we walk around, I'll point it out. Down here with the monarchs, not so much. It's just cyclical, but not necessarily for one reason or another. Just, as the population decides to, as some mate and lay eggs and they hatch. I mean, they tend to be, come in clusters. So there'll be a bunch at once, and then there might not be some for a little while, and then they'll come back because they'll turn into butterflies and lay their own eggs. Another thing that you'll see if you do have milkweeds is milkweed bugs, which are these, in fact, here's a cluster of them back here. There are these orange and black bugs. They're not harmful.
Spiders.
They do look a little bit like spiders, but they only have 6 legs, and they don't do anything harmful, but they also like this plant. They do tend to eat milkweed seeds. That's their favorite. And I do see over here, I see a lot of caterpillar poop. So there was somebody eating not too long ago, though I don't see him now, so maybe he got full and is, making a chrysalis somewhere. So in addition to the giant milkweed, we have the regular milkweed. Here's a small one that has popped up.
Why are they named the milkweeds?
They're called milkweeds because it'll be easier actually on the larger, we'll break off one of these larger leaves. It has a milky sap. Oh, and I broke off, look at that, I'll put this back, but look at that, you see him?
Is it a larva?
It's a baby caterpillar, yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh.
That's a baby monarch caterpillar. So a lot of plants, they all have sap inside them, and sometimes it's white, sometimes it's different colors. I'm gonna try and put this guy, hopefully he'll find a leaf that I didn't rip off. So as we walk around, I'll show you milkweed because it has popped up in a lot of different places. This is Senna mexicana. It gets these yellow flowers. This is the host plant for the yellow and white butterflies.
This is the one for the...
This is a host plant for the yellow and the white butterflies. So sulfurs. Yeah, this is also Florida. This is a native plant. It's really wonderful. It flowers pretty much all year round, and it hosts the different kinds of caterpillars.
And the name of the plant is?
This is Chapman's sensitive plant. This is our typical milkweed. These are what the flowers look like. There's a lot of different ones that fall into the milkweed category, and there's a fair amount of different ones. But the cool thing about this is, so not only is it a plant that the caterpillars can eat, but it's a plant that has flowers that the butterflies can get food from too. This is called Thunbergia erecta. This is clock vine. Isn't it pretty?
Yeah.
So that's Passiflora tuberosa, corky stem passionflower, is our native passionflower vine, and it's the host plant for 3 of our native butterflies, the Florida state butterfly, the zebra longwing, the Julia heliconia butterfly, and the Gulf fritillary. So it's the inside of the flower is yellow like that to attract pollinators. So they see that and it's kind of like a runway, right? They see that and it's like a bright light to them. They're like, ooh, that looks like a flower where we can get some nice nectar.
Why do they do that?
Well, so plants have evolved to have different traits, like different colors, to attract different insects and birds and things to them so that they can produce seeds and reproduce. So each one has different characteristics that'll attract different wildlife to them so that they can reproduce in their native habitat. So where this plant comes from, this flower probably attracts hummingbirds.
Oh, I love hummingbirds.
Hummingbirds are really cool. So I have a lot of plants here that attract hummingbirds. This one is a great butterfly plant. Again, it's kind of a weed, but blue mist flower. But it's great because it flowers all the time, it spreads on its own, and in particular the queen butterflies really like it for food. And then right here, this is a Kunti, and this has nice fresh new growth on it, which is why the leaves are so pale green. So Kuntis are the host plant for our Atala butterflies, which were almost extinct but are coming back, and it's a great plant. So as we go through, I do have a lot of other great plants in here that are good for attracting birds. We didn't talk so much about birds. We did just mention hummingbirds. So some of the things that are great for birds are native bushes. So we've got a couple of different kinds of stoppers. We've got red berry stopper and red stopper. We have Simpson's stopper, white stopper, and Spanish stopper. They're called stoppers. That's an interesting reason why they have that common name. The early pioneers who came here realized that they had anti-diuretic properties.
Ah, okay.
So it literally stopped them up. So that's how they got the name stopper.
This one.
This is a nice native. This is wild cinnamon bark.
Oh,
So it's not quite cinnamon, the traditional cinnamon that you would use in your house, but it does have similar properties, so that's why
Is it edible?
No, I don't think so, but birds like to eat the fruits when they form. These are just flower buds, and those will open into little flowers, and then these here you can see some fruits are forming, and birds love to eat that.
Is the bark edible?
Is the bark edible? I don't think so. Not like real cinnamon. But the stoppers are great as a place for birds to nest, in addition to creating berries for them to eat. So it's a great food source and a great shelter. And if you do want to attract birds to your yard, it's important to have both food, water, and shelter. I say both, but 3 things: food, water, and shelter for birds. The food tends to be types of native berries and fruits. Or you can also attract them with bird seed. If you want nectar birds, like hummingbirds, you have to have nectar flowers for them. Shelter means having trees, like oak trees are great. They provide dense foliage and great branch structure for them to nest in. Shrubs like this, where they're nice and dense and they can hide their young in there and they don't have to worry necessarily about predators being able to see them. Those are really important. And then having water, particularly here where it's so hot, having a source of water like a bird bath or something where you change the water regularly so it doesn't get too disgusting, but where they can cool off and have a sip to drink is really important, because just like us, they get thirsty.
We live in an apartment and we have pots and we put plant flowers.
Are they on your balcony?
Yeah.
Okay. Is your balcony have a screen or is it open? It's open? Okay. What floor are you on?
6.
Okay, so you're not too high up. So probably if you plant some of these flower plants, really anything that has flowers is going to attract either bees or butterflies that they'll come and they'll eat them. But you could probably try growing some milkweed on your balcony and see if some monarchs come. It depends on, you know, what side you're facing, how much wind it gets. There's different factors, but there are different plants you can always try. Okay. Well, I'm sure that there are a lot of different plants that you can plant that will attract different things, including birds. You could even maybe have a little bird feeder, and you could get birds to come to your balcony. Can you guess what maybe somebody might call it?
I don't know, but I think I've seen a...
It's called shrimp plant because it kind of looks like shrimps. The shrimp plant is great for, particularly for hummingbirds, but also for moths that have a longer proboscis that, you know, have something they'll reach in and sip out the nectar. This is one of my favorite natives. This is Jamaican caper, and it gets, the flowers start out white and fade to this pinkish purple. And even when it's not in bloom, it's just got really beautiful foliage and creates a nice dense shrub, so it's great for birds. Sometimes the different flowers have really nice fragrances, and fragrance is something that attracts different pollinators. So this plant here, this is a palm tree. This is a Cuban palm. It's called grandfather palm because it has like a grandfather's beard. It looks like Cinderella's long hair, kind of like tangled.
Rapunzel.
And while you were talking, I looked over there and there's another one as well.
Yes, I have a few of them in the park. And if you do have palm trees, do try and leave them, the flowers on them, long enough for the bees to enjoy. And then you can cut them off if you don't want them to seed all over your yard. But the flowers are a really nice food source for bees in particular. These are nice. These flower a lot throughout the year. And again, they're a great plant for bees and butterflies. So this one right here, you're going to want to smell this. So, crush up some of these and smell it. What's it smell like? Does it smell like popcorn? A lot of people think that it smells like buttered popcorn, and so this plant has the common name of popcorn senna. This one doesn't attract birds so much as as a senna, it's a host plant for the sulfur and white butterflies. So if they eat the yellow flowers, the caterpillars will be yellow.
Yellow over there is part of the plant?
Yes, the yellow flowers. If we walk around this way, we'll see, you can see the yellow flower stalks better. And so this is popcorn senna. And things are fragrant at different times of the day. So sometimes they'll be more fragrant in the early morning or in the evening than they are at this time of day. Those flowers that you're holding come from this tree. Yeah.
Are they orchids?
They're not, but they do kind of look like an orchid flower. These flowers, if you ever go to Hawaii or go to a Hawaiian themed party, you know they'll have, you know, the leis that they'll make, the necklaces out of flowers. These are the flowers that are traditionally used to make the leis. And they have a nice scent. They come in all sorts of different colors.
Smell really good.
They do, right? And so this tree, part of the year, it loses all of its leaves, and so sometimes it looks almost like it's dead. But then it comes back really nicely, full of leaves and flowers. So I talked some about natives and near natives. This is what I would consider a near native. It's from Jamaica and the Bahamas, and it grows really well here because it grows naturally in limestone rocks and soil, and since we have limestone soil, it does really well. It gets these beautiful bell-shaped flowers. Oops, one fell off. It's called Portlandia, and I have a pink one here, and then there's another Portlandia species here that has white bell-shaped flowers. This is another type of plumeria or frangipani. So again, the flowers can be used to make leis, and they have a really beautiful fragrance. So again, we've got more of the Kunti, Zamia pumila, that's in here. We don't have any atalas right now, but it would be great to introduce some. And it's a type of cycad. This is another type of cycad. Cycads are among the oldest plants on this earth. They were around in the time of the dinosaurs. And so there are a lot of different types of sennas and cassias that we've talked about are a host plant for these yellow and white butterflies. One yellow butterfly just fluttered off. This is another type of senna, Senna nitida. Another really great native that I absolutely love, and is finally being sold a bit more at nurseries, is this. This is Melochia tomentosa, Mugean tea bush. It's a native. It flowers pretty much all year, and bees absolutely love it. And we know why bees are important because they are what pollinates all of our food sources. These should be coming into bloom soon, and they get really, really pretty purple flowers. This is not native, but it's a really nice exotic tropical plant. It's called Tabuchi'no, Grandifolia. And isn't it soft and fuzzy?
Yeah.
Different plants have different attributes. Some of them have fuzzy leaves, some of them have nice smells, and those do different things. So those fuzzy leaves probably keep certain animals where it's native to, probably keep certain animals from eating the leaves because they probably don't like that texture.
When will they bloom?
They should actually be coming into bloom very soon. Here, this is a pentas, which isn't native but is very common as a landscape plant, and it's the host for the Tursa sphinx and the Pluto sphinx, and they come in a lot of different colors. And then this one that you were just asking me about, this is the this is a Bauhinia vine, which is gets these really pretty orange and yellow flowers. And then we have a native aster flower here, which is a great nectar source. This little yellow butterfly fluttering around, if you can see it, that's one of the sulfur butterflies that I was talking about.
Like get the nectar.
Yeah, so he'll get the nectar from some of these flowers, and then he'll go and lay eggs, or she'll go and lay eggs. So this tree here that I was talking about is from Kenya, Magidea zangarabica, and it gets, the flowers are usually kind of inconspicuous, but it's the seed pods that are really striking. But you can see some of the little green flowers here. And then the green seed pods forming after they've been pollinated. But then the seed pods, once they're mature, they're red on the inside, and they stay on the tree for a long time, and they're really pretty red. And they get these really cool, feel that.
Whoa,
That's the seed. It's like velvet kind of, right?
Like in very small egg.
Like a very small egg. Another really nice native is firebush. Firebush is great for butterflies and hummingbirds. It's got the tubular flowers that attracts the hummingbirds, but it's also great for butterflies, and it blooms pretty much all year. Something else you're gonna think is really cool. This is a native ground cover. The flowers just dried up, but if you go ahead and touch the leaf on this. Oops. If you touch it, look what happens. It closes. So this is called sensitive plant because it's sensitive to touch. As you touch it, the leaves close up. Maybe another time, but it does that to conserve water. So
We
right,
had those in New Jersey when I was a kid.
isn't it cool?
Yeah,
I love it.
I remember thinking.
So this tree here, you smell this flower, this leaf. This is bay rum, and over here,
Oh, it does smell rummish.
over here, this one, you can.
A different smell?
Same genus, different species.
Thank you.
This one is Allspice. So they're the same genus of plant, but they're different species, and they have two different fragrances, and they have two different uses. This is candlestick senna because it gets long, candle-like flowers. This one, it looks a lot like the popcorn senna, but it doesn't have a scent. It's a different plant. This is another species of Portlandia, which is, you know, you can see it's got these beautiful white bell-shaped flowers. We've got another really cool native right here. This one is called necklace pod, and it's called that because after it blooms with these yellow flowers, which again are really great for hummingbirds, the seed pods on this kind of create like a little necklace that rattles.
They look like beads.
They do, they look like beads. Yeah, here's some right there. These are little ones.
Oh,
But yeah, if
I
you shake
see.
them, they kind of rattle a little. This is a honeysuckle. So again, the shape of the flower is really nice for hummingbirds, and so they can get a lot of nectar out of that. And then we've got native grasses. So we've got like a lot of different plants here. It's a bottle palm because it's kind of shaped like a bottle, and those spikes are going to open up into flowers.
What color flowers do you know?
I think they're going to be white.
Do they attract birds?
They attract bees. This is called chenille plant or cat's tail, and those are all lots of little flowers. It's a little bit sticky, but all of those things hanging down is full of flowers. And this is a really great native. This is Lignum Vitae. So this is the seed.
Looks like a bean.
It's got this red seed, and it gets purpley blue flowers that are great for bees. It's a very slow grower. It was, again, almost made extinct because it's a very hard wood, and so people were logging it to build with the wood. And because it grows so slowly, it was hard to get them back in population. We have fire spikes, which again are really great for bees and butterflies and hummingbirds. This is a nice native. This is golden dewdrop, because when the fruit forms after the flower has been pollinated, it's kind of a golden dewdrop. Provides flowers as a food source for bees and butterflies. A lot of different things in here that are great for different kinds of bees and butterflies and birds. This is one of my favorite natives. This is Florida Keys black bead, and it's called black bead because of the seed pods on it that get these black beads. But look at that, they're covered, this part is called the Arielle that surrounds the seed, and it's this bright red color. Isn't that cool? Powder puffy flowers. Oh, here's some right here. These are the flowers. And so those are great for bees and butterflies and hummingbirds.